The street was quiet and clean, just like every other morning. Small houses stood in neat lines, painted in soft colors. Lawns were trimmed evenly, and no car stood where it should not. It was the kind of place that looked perfect from the outside. People believed nothing bad could happen there. Mark and his wife Anna lived in one of those houses. They had moved there 2 years ago. Mark wanted a calm life after many hard years of work. He never talked about his past. He did not like attention. He liked fixing things around the house and keeping to himself. Anna was different. She was warm and friendly. She loved plants and flowers. Every morning, she spent time in the front yard, caring for her small garden. It made her happy. The flowers gave color to the quiet street. The neighborhood was controlled by a home owners group. They had many rules. The rules were written on long papers and posted online. Lawn height mattered. Trash bins had to be placed just right. Cars could not stay in the driveway too long. Some people liked the order. Others felt the rules were too strict. Most people followed them to avoid trouble. Anna had received small notices before. Nothing serious. A reminder about the fence color. A note about plant placement. She never argued. She always believed problems could be solved by talking. That morning, Anna was watering her flowers near the porch. The air was cool, and the sun was just rising. She felt peaceful. Then she heard a car stop nearby. She looked up and saw a dark vehicle near the gate. 2 men stepped out. They wore neat shirts and badges. Their faces were serious. They walked with confidence, like they owned the place. Anna turned off the water and smiled politely. One man spoke first. He said the flowers were placed too close to the walkway. He said it was against the rules. Anna listened calmly. She explained that the flowers were already there when they moved in. She said she would adjust them soon. The second man shook his head. He said warnings had already been given. He said fines could be added. Anna felt uncomfortable. Their tone was harsh. She asked them to wait and speak with her husband. She said Mark was inside. The men did not agree. One stepped closer. He pointed at the ground near the flowers. He said the change must happen now. Anna stepped back slowly. She felt nervous. She tried to stay polite. She said she needed time and turned slightly toward the door. Suddenly, the first man grabbed her arm. It was sudden and rough. Anna gasped in shock. The watering can fell from her hand. Water spilled across the steps. Anna felt fear rush through her body. She cried out loudly. The door opened. Mark stepped outside. He stopped when he saw Anna being held. His face changed instantly. His calm expression disappeared. His eyes focused sharply on the man touching his wife. The men turned toward him. One of them spoke loudly. He said this was official business. He told Mark to stay back. Mark did not shout. He walked forward slowly. His steps were firm. He reached out and removed the man's hand from Anna's arm. His movement was controlled and strong. Mark placed Anna behind him. He stood between her and the men. The men looked annoyed. One of them laughed lightly. He said Mark was making things worse. Mark told them to leave his property. His voice was calm but firm. The second man raised his voice. He said they had authority. He said Mark would regret standing in their way. Neighbors began to notice. Curtains moved. A door opened slightly across the street. People watched quietly. Anna held her arm. It hurt, but more than pain, she felt shaken. She looked at Mark and saw a side of him she rarely saw. He looked steady and fearless. Mark asked Anna if she was okay. She nodded slowly. The men stepped back. They said this was not finished. They returned to their car and drove away. The street became quiet again. Mark stayed outside for a moment. His hands were steady, but inside, old memories stirred. He had left his past behind for a reason. He wanted peace. He wanted safety for Anna. Anna leaned against him. She said she was scared. Mark held her gently. He told her she was safe now. That evening, Mark sat on the porch alone. The street lights turned on. The quiet neighborhood felt different. Something had changed. Mark knew this was only the beginning. The men had crossed a line they did not understand. And the calm street would not stay calm for long. The next morning felt heavier than usual. The sun rose the same way, but the air carried tension. Anna woke early, her arms still sore. She moved carefully while getting ready. Mark noticed her discomfort, though she tried to hide it. Mark made breakfast quietly. He watched Anna from across the table. She smiled, but it was not the same smile. Fear still lived behind her eyes. Mark told her to rest at home that day. He said he would handle anything that came. Anna agreed, though she did not want to feel weak. She trusted Mark. After breakfast, Mark stepped outside. He walked slowly around the house, checking doors and windows. Not because he was afraid, but because he believed in preparation. Old habits returned without effort. Across the street, a neighbor named Paul watched from his porch. Paul was an older man who liked to talk but rarely caused trouble. He waved at Mark. Mark waved back. Paul walked over and spoke in a low voice. He said he saw what happened the day before. He said the men had no right to touch Anna. He said others in the neighborhood were angry too, but no one wanted to speak up. Mark listened quietly. He thanked Paul for his concern. He did not explain anything. He did not need to. Later that day, a notice was placed on Mark's door. It was from the home owners group. The paper listed several violations. Flower placement. Walkway access. Improper behavior toward officials. Mark read the paper carefully. His face remained calm. He folded the paper and placed it on the table. Anna saw it and felt worried. She asked what it meant. Mark told her not to worry. He said he would handle it properly. In the afternoon, Mark visited the home owner's office. The building was clean and modern. A large sign listed rules in bold letters. Cameras watched every corner. Inside, a woman sat behind the desk. Her name was Linda. She spoke politely but coldly. She asked Mark why he was there. Mark placed the notice on the desk. He said the charges were false. He explained calmly what happened. Linda listened but did not change her expression. She said the men followed procedure. She said resistance was noted. Mark asked if grabbing a homeowner was part of procedure. Linda paused for a moment. She said she would review the case. Her tone suggested the outcome was already decided. Mark thanked her and left. Outside, he stood for a moment and breathed deeply. He looked at the sky. He reminded himself why he chose a quiet life. That evening, 2 different men came to the house. They wore similar badges. Their posture was stiff. They stood at the gate and called out loudly. Mark stepped outside and closed the door behind him. The men said they were there to inspect the property. Mark told them to leave. He said all communication must be in writing. One man smirked. He said Mark was not cooperating. He stepped forward. Mark raised his hand and told them to stop. His voice was calm but firm. The men felt something change. Mark's presence was different. His eyes were steady. His stance was balanced. They hesitated. One of them said they would return with higher authority. They turned and left. Anna watched from the window. She felt proud and scared at the same time. That night, Mark and Anna talked for a long time. Anna asked about his past. She said she needed to understand. Mark stayed silent for a while. Then he spoke slowly. He said he had served his country for many years. He said he had seen enough conflict for one lifetime. He said he wanted peace. Anna held his hand. She said peace did not mean weakness. The next day, the neighborhood buzzed with quiet talk. People shared stories. Others had faced harsh treatment, fines, threats, intimidation. No one had stood up before. Mark noticed neighbors watching him differently now. With curiosity, with hope. Paul visited again. He said a meeting was being planned. People wanted Mark there. They believed he could help. Mark said he would attend. At the meeting, the room was full. Faces showed frustration and fear. Mark stood quietly until asked to speak. When he did, his words were simple. He said rules should protect people, not harm them. He said respect must go both ways. He said silence allowed mistreatment to grow. The room grew quiet. People nodded. The homeowners' leaders sat stiffly. They did not like the shift in power. One of them warned Mark to be careful. He said trouble followed those who challenged authority. Mark looked at him calmly. He said trouble already arrived at his door. After the meeting, Anna hugged Mark tightly. She said she was proud of him. But deep down, Mark knew this fight was far from over. The homeowners group would not give up easily. And the men who crossed the line would not forget. The calm neighborhood stood at the edge of change. The days after the meeting felt tense. The neighborhood looked the same, but people acted differently. Neighbors spoke in low voices. Doors closed more quickly. Cars slowed near Mark's house, then moved on. Mark stayed calm. He followed his routine. Morning walks. Light repairs around the house. Quiet evenings with Anna. But inside, he stayed alert. He knew pressure often came before bigger moves. Anna tried to return to normal life. She worked in the garden again, though she stayed closer to the house. Mark watched from the porch, not in fear, but in care. He wanted her to feel safe. One afternoon, a new letter arrived. This one was longer. It listed more violations. It demanded payment within days. It warned of further action if ignored. Anna's hands shook while reading it. She asked Mark what would happen. Mark told her they would respond calmly and correctly. He said fear was what the group wanted. He would not give it to them. That evening, Paul came over again. He brought news. He said several neighbors received similar letters after attending the meeting. He said it felt planned. Mark listened carefully. He thanked Paul for sharing. He told him to tell others to keep records of everything. Dates, letters, visits, words spoken. Paul nodded. He said people trusted Mark. They felt stronger knowing someone stood firm. The next day, a large inspection was announced. Notices were placed across the neighborhood. Officials would visit homes one by one. Anna felt nervous again. She asked Mark if they should leave for the day. Mark shook his head. He said hiding would only encourage more pressure. They would stay. The inspection team arrived near noon. 3 people walked toward the house. They carried boards and papers. Cameras hung from their shirts. Mark stepped outside before they reached the porch. He greeted them calmly. He asked them to state their purpose. One of them read from a paper. He listed items to be checked. He spoke fast and without warmth. Mark listened. Then he said all inspections must follow proper notice rules. He said this visit did not meet those rules. The inspector frowned. He said Mark was being difficult. Mark did not argue. He asked them to leave and return with correct notice. They hesitated. They looked at each other. One of them tried to step past Mark. Mark shifted his stance slightly. He did not touch anyone. He did not raise his voice. But his presence was firm. The inspectors stopped. Neighbors watched from their windows. Phones appeared. Quiet recording began. The lead inspector cleared his throat. He said they would return later. They walked away. Anna released a breath she did not know she was holding. That night, Mark received a call. The voice on the line was cold. The caller said Mark was causing problems. He said life could be easier if Mark cooperated. Mark replied calmly. He said respect worked both ways. He ended the call. Anna heard his voice and asked who it was. Mark told her the truth. He said pressure often increased when control slipped. Anna asked if his past training helped him now. Mark nodded slightly. He said discipline helped him stay calm. He said understanding people helped him predict moves. The next morning, a local reporter arrived. Someone had shared the story. The reporter asked neighbors about the strict rules and recent behavior. People spoke carefully at first, then more openly. Stories came out. Fines without warning. Harsh visits. Fear. Mark did not seek attention. But when asked, he spoke clearly. He described what happened to Anna. He spoke without anger. He spoke with facts. The report spread quickly. Online comments grew. The home owners group released a short statement. They denied wrongdoing. Pressure shifted. Inside the home owner's office, leaders argued. Some wanted to push harder. Others feared public attention. Another letter arrived for Mark. This one requested a formal review meeting. Anna looked worried again. She asked if it was a trap. Mark said it was a chance. At the meeting, the room felt cold. Leaders sat behind a long table. Papers were stacked neatly. Mark sat alone across from them. They spoke about rules and authority. They spoke about order. Mark listened. Then he spoke. He said order without fairness caused harm. He said rules without respect led to fear. He said touching a homeowner crossed a line. Silence filled the room. One leader tried to dismiss his words. Mark calmly placed documents on the table. Photos, dates, statements from neighbors. The leaders exchanged looks. They said they would review everything. After the meeting, Mark felt tired but steady. He knew change was slow. That evening, Anna noticed something new. Neighbors waved more often. Someone left flowers near their fence. A note said thank you. Anna smiled for the first time in days. Mark stood beside her. He knew the situation was still fragile. But something important had shifted. Fear was losing its grip. And when fear faded, truth became stronger. The neighborhood was waking up. The review meeting did not end the problem. It only changed its shape. The home owners group became quiet for a few days. No visits. No letters. The silence felt heavy, like a pause before a storm. Mark noticed cars slowing near his house again. Some stopped for a moment, then moved on. He wrote down times and details in a small notebook. He stayed calm, but alert. Anna tried to relax. She focused on cooking and light chores. Still, every sound outside made her pause. Mark noticed and reassured her often. He reminded her that they were not alone anymore. One morning, Paul came running across the street. His face showed worry. He said 2 neighbors received heavy fines overnight. The reasons were unclear. Both neighbors had supported Mark during the meeting. Mark understood the message. Pressure was returning, but more quietly. That afternoon, Mark visited those neighbors. He listened to their stories. He encouraged them to keep records and stay united. He told them fear worked only when people stood alone. Word spread quickly. More people began talking. A group chat formed. Neighbors shared photos and letters. Patterns became clear. Anna helped organize the information. She labeled papers and sorted messages. She felt useful again. Fear slowly turned into purpose. A second reporter contacted Mark. This one wanted details about the fines and sudden pressure. Mark agreed to speak, but only with facts. He made sure neighbors gave permission before sharing their stories. The story reached more people. Comments poured in. Some supported the home owners group, but many questioned their behavior. Inside the homeowner's office, tension grew. Leaders argued again. One member suggested backing down. Another wanted to enforce rules harder to regain control. A decision was made. A large enforcement action would take place. The next weekend, several officials arrived together. They spread out across the street. They took pictures and notes. Their presence felt heavy. Mark stepped outside and stood calmly near his gate. Anna watched from inside but stayed close. She trusted Mark, but fear still whispered in her mind. One official approached Mark and handed him a paper. It listed severe penalties and deadlines. Mark read it carefully. He nodded and handed it back. He said all future communication must go through legal review. He said harassment would be documented. The official scoffed. He said Mark was threatening. Mark replied calmly. He said he was protecting his family and neighbors. Cameras were watching. Phones recorded quietly. The officials felt the pressure. They moved on. That evening, a community meeting was held at a nearby hall. The room was full. More people than before came. Fear had pushed them together. Mark did not lead the meeting. He stood among them. People spoke one by one. A mother talked about stress. An elderly man talked about fear of losing his home. A young couple talked about constant fines. Anna spoke too. Her voice shook at first, but she continued. She spoke about being treated without respect. She spoke about fear turning into strength when people stood together. The room filled with quiet support. A plan formed. The community would request an independent review. They would submit records. They would stand united. Mark helped organize tasks. He did not command. He guided. Days passed. Officials reduced visits. Letters slowed. The group felt the shift. Then something unexpected happened. One of the original enforcers resigned. He released a short statement online. He said pressure from leadership pushed them too far. He said he was sorry. The statement spread fast. The homeowners group released another message. This time, the tone was different. They announced a temporary pause on enforcement while a review took place. Anna felt relief wash over her. She hugged Mark tightly. But Mark stayed cautious. He knew change needed follow-through. The independent review began. Documents were submitted. Statements were taken. Neighbors spoke openly. Mark attended interviews quietly. He answered questions with clarity and calm. His discipline showed. Weeks later, results were announced. Procedures were criticized. Actions were labeled inappropriate. New guidelines were ordered. Leadership changes followed. Some members stepped down. The neighborhood felt lighter. One evening, Mark and Anna sat on the porch. The air felt calm again. Children played down the street. Neighbors talked openly. Anna smiled and said she finally felt safe. Mark nodded. He said safety came from people standing together. He looked down the street. He knew the fight had not been about rules. It was about respect. And respect, once demanded calmly and together, had power. The neighborhood had learned that silence was not peace. Peace came from courage. The neighborhood felt different now. Mornings were quieter in a good way. Not silent with fear, but calm with trust. People walked freely again. Doors stayed open longer. Smiles returned to faces that once looked worried. Mark noticed the change right away. He saw neighbors talking in small groups. Children played without parents watching every step. The air felt lighter. Anna felt it too. She returned fully to her garden. She planted new flowers near the porch, not because rules allowed it, but because she wanted beauty back in her life. Neighbors stopped to compliment her work. Some even brought plants to share. The independent review continued for several weeks. Officials visited, but this time they came with respect. They listened more than they spoke. They took notes carefully. They asked real questions. Mark attended the final review meeting. Anna went with him. They sat side by side. The room was full. New faces sat where old leaders once did. The tone was calm. There were no raised voices. The review leader spoke clearly. He said the past system caused harm. He said changes would be made. Rules would remain, but enforcement would focus on communication and respect. Apologies were offered. Not perfect ones, but honest enough to matter. Anna felt a quiet release inside her chest. She did not need anger anymore. She needed peace. Mark stood when asked to speak. He kept his words simple. He said people wanted order, but not fear. He said safety came from trust. He said the neighborhood deserved dignity. The room listened. After the meeting, neighbors gathered outside. There was laughter. Some hugged. Others shook hands. It felt like a new beginning. Over the next months, visible changes happened. New representatives were chosen by vote. Clear processes were written and shared. Visits required notice. No one was touched or spoken to harshly again. Mark stepped back from the center slowly. He did not seek a role. He believed the community could stand on its own now. Anna noticed people still came to Mark for advice. He listened and guided quietly. He never demanded control. One evening, Paul came over with a small box. Inside was a simple plaque. It thanked Mark and Anna for standing up when others were afraid. Mark was surprised. He tried to refuse, but Anna smiled and accepted it. They placed the plaque inside the house, not outside. It was not for display. It was a reminder. Life settled into a steady rhythm. Mornings with coffee. Afternoons with light work. Evenings with quiet talks. Mark often sat on the porch at night. He watched the street lights glow. He thought about how close he came to losing peace. He thought about how strength did not always mean force. Sometimes it meant patience. Anna joined him one night. She rested her head on his shoulder. She said she was glad he did not hide who he was. Mark replied that he was glad he learned when to stand. They talked about the future. Travel plans. Small home improvements. Simple dreams. One weekend, a community event was held. Tables lined the street. Food was shared. Music played softly. Laughter filled the air. Anna helped organize flowers along the tables. Mark helped set up chairs. Neighbors worked together without fear or tension. A young couple thanked Mark quietly. They said his actions helped them stay in their home. An older woman thanked Anna for speaking when it was hard. Mark nodded. Anna smiled. As the sun set, lights turned on across the street. The neighborhood glowed warmly. Mark looked around and felt something rare. Contentment. He knew challenges would always exist. No place was perfect. But people had learned an important lesson. Silence allowed harm to grow. Calm courage could stop it. Later that night, Mark and Anna walked hand in hand back to their house. The flowers near the porch swayed gently in the breeze. Anna looked at them and smiled. Mark opened the door and stepped inside. The house felt safe again. Not because of rules. Not because of authority. But because people chose respect. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything.